I can't wait to grow and shift and move someday. No, I don't want to say that. That's not going to be helpful. I mean, it's going to be helpful, but it's going to ruin it. Research. This is all premise of the book, by the by. Not as Buffy as, not as Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I'm just afraid to do anything. I'm just never gonna leave my house. It pays to be a homebody. I'm gonna go for walks. I'm just gonna stay home. Hi everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse, and welcome to part 1 of what I read in April. So I'm very excited to say that I'm having a really good reading month. If you guys saw my March wrap-ups, then you would have heard me talk about how I am really leaning into the audiobooks because it's really working for me, because I'm finding editing my book and trying to physically read other people's books to be quite a challenge. But luckily, lots of amazing books are on audio, and I've also knocked out a couple physically. I've knocked out, literally a couple, too. So, without any further ado, let's dive in. So first things first, I did want to mention that I did finish reading The Kind Worth Killing, and I am currently reading The Kind Worth Saving. Books on my nightstand. So after I finish this, I will talk about these books in conjunction since they are a duology. So just so you guys know, if you guys follow me on Instagram, ding, you would know that I've been reading these because I've been posting about them incessantly. And if you don't follow me on Instagram, love to have you. It'd be very cool. You could see some behind the scenes a little bit more. You could watch me try and make some reels, but I definitely post on there more consistently. But all that to say, I'm loving, so I reread Kind Worth Killing. I'm loving The Kind Worth Saving. So these will be coming in part 2. If that's an incentive for you guys to come back for more. But let's talk about books I actually read this month. So if you guys saw my vlog that I did that would have gone up a few weeks ago, I did a sort of a spontaneous weekend vlog because I was just feeling spontaneous and like vlogging. And I talked about A Flaw in the Design by Nathan Oates. So I had been reading this during the vlog and I actually finished it during the vlog. But I've been reading it for a little bit. This was one of the first books that sort of fell victim to Audrey's writing editing, getting in the way of Audrey's reading other writers. But I really enjoyed this book. So this just came out in March. And this was one of those books that was on my most anticipated. So again, if you're following me here, you would have seen me talk about it before in my most anticipated for March. And I was strolling through the bookstore and it was out early in my bookstore, so I grabbed it. It just felt like a sign. It felt like a sign. So I picked it up and I bought it and I read it and I really, really enjoyed it. This is, it says it like right on the cover, The Cleverest Psychopaths Hide in Plain Sight. I'm a fan of a psychopath book. Again, if you've been here for a minute, you already know that. So this one really grabbed my attention in terms of the synopsis of the book and I very much enjoyed it. Like it did not disappoint. Let's just say that. So the setup for this book is we have a 17-year-old boy named Matthew. So he is Upper East Side, very wealthy family, very wealthy parents, and they wind up dying in a car crash. And Matthew winds up being sent to Vermont to go live with his uncle Gil. So Gil is his mother's brother. And Gil lives in Vermont. He is a professor at a small university up there, a creative writing professor, and he lives there with his wife and his 2 daughters. But the rub is that there's a little bit of a history between Gil and Matthew and the families. So about 5 years ago, Gil and his family had gone to Montauk to stay with his sister and her husband and Matthew when he was a little bit younger. And there was an incident which led Gil to believe that Matthew tried to drown his younger daughter. And it caused a rift between them. And now Matthew was coming to live in their house. So this is one of those books where you're kind of trying to decipher if Gil is projecting all of these fears onto Matthew and he's really just this 17-year-old boy who's dealing with the grief and loss of his parents, or if there's something going on with Matthew that is really there. And is Gil losing his mind? Is he seeing things that he isn't seeing? Is anybody believing him? Or is he seeing things that aren't there? Are other people going to believe him? So Matthew is super smart. So he is finishing out his high school classes remotely, and he is also auditing some classes at the college. And he takes Gil's creative writing class, and he starts to write some very chilling and very disturbing stories that really has Gil wondering what's going on. And he just starts to question everything. So I would say this is definitely a slow burn book. It's very character driven. It's very creepy in all the best ways. So I very much enjoyed the writing of this. The book does have dual timelines that happen in here. We do get to spend some time in New York City, which I always enjoy. It felt just very, like I say, like creepy and realistically creepy to me. So I thought he did a really good job with this book and with these characters, and I really, really enjoyed it. I keep saying I really, really enjoyed it. I did really enjoy it, you guys, though, and I love this cover. I just think it's really great. But I really loved the way he explored the dynamic between Gil and Matthew, and really that, you know, kind of messing with us as the reader, trying to determine what's really going on here and what's truth and what's fiction. And I just thought it was great. And I feel like there's a lot of obsession to this and sort of being so tunnel vision on something. It's very hard to talk about without ruining anything, but I thought it was a great book. Highly recommend it. If this one has been on your radar, I think it's worth the read. And if it's not, maybe it will be on your radar now. But big fan. I will definitely be checking out more things from Nathan Oates in the future. And I'm so happy I got my hands on it early. So yes. So I am, if you can't tell, on a huge Peter Swanson kick right now. And I did read All the Beautiful Lies. So I did do the audiobook of this. This was read by Sarah Mollo-Christensen. And this is a book that I've had on my shelves forever. So again, if you guys have been here for a minute, you know I'm a massive Peter Swanson fan. This was one of those books where I felt like I heard a snippet of what it was about. And I think this is one of those books that can be very polarizing. People are either like totally cool with it or totally not. And it just sort of put me off when I was just hearing sort of those polarizing points of view. But I also feel like it should come to no surprise to anybody who watches me to know I freaking loved this book. And I went into it with a bit of apprehension, and like out of the gate, I was just sort of like, this is amazing. So mind you, there are a lot of dark subject matters in this. There was something I had heard about the book where I was like, I think I misheard this. And then I was like, oh no, I didn't mishear it. But I love me some Peter Swanson. So he is just him on the page all the time, as I feel like is the best way to describe him. So this was actually his fourth book. I had thought this was like his second book, but it doesn't even matter. Point being, I think he just continues to lean into / not be afraid of going to all of the dark places, which makes me a huge fan. And I have to say that this book inspires me as a writer, as do all of Peter Swanson's books. But I was actually driving a couple weekends ago over the long weekend. I was going to visit family. And I feel like it's kind of like I do really good thinking when I'm walking, when I'm in the shower, and apparently when I'm driving. It's when my mind gets to go places. Not always great when you're in the car. I was fine. It's totally fine. But I was thinking about this book, and I was thinking about other books that I'm reading. And I sort of had this aha moment, which is not revolutionary by any stretch, but it's like, don't hold back in my writing. I definitely think I can censor myself. I definitely think I can hold back. I know it is something that a lot of writers battle because you're always thinking about who's going to read this, what are people going to think, and it's hard to get out of that mindset. But as I was reading this book, and as I was listening to The Kind Worth Killing, and as I'm reading The Kind Worth Saving, and many other books by a lot of my favorite authors, Jennifer Hillier, I just feel like the ability to not hold back and to go anywhere and everywhere you want to go, no matter how dark and messed up it is, ding dong, I just love it. So let's talk about this book. This is a book that I definitely feel like it's best to go into it blind, as I feel like with most thrillers. And in this one, we meet Harry Ackerson. So it is a few days before his college graduation, and he winds up getting a phone call from his stepmother, Alice, that his father has died. His father and Alice live in Maine, and his father has had a slip and fall on this like beach walk that he walks all the time. And there are questions from the police. Is this an accident? Is it a suicide? Harry is devastated. He winds up obviously going home for his father's funeral, and he winds up living with his stepmother. So he does not really know Alice very well. Harry's mother passed away when he was, I want to say, a younger teenager. He was living in New York City with his father at the time, and then his father wanted to move to Maine, and he met Alice, who was his realtor. So they wound up getting married when Harry was a freshman in college. So he's gone back for some holidays and stuff, but he doesn't know her all that well. And then it was notable that Alice was younger. So Harry is a senior in college. His father was 50 and she's kind of like right in the middle. So I believe she's like 35, 36 years old. And we wind up getting multiple POVs in this. We get lots of questions, and sort of the more Harry is home, the more he's starting to question what happened to his father and is starting to look into what happened to his father. And in typical thrillery fashion, we get all sorts of secrets and lies and questions and just amazing things going on. And again, I feel like there's so many things I want to say about this book that are cornerstones of Peter Swanson's writing, but I'm so fearful of saying anything that might give something away. And I even feel like this is a case of like, this front flap tells you more than you need to know. So I think just what you need to know is Harry comes home. He's obviously grieving. He's confused. He's feeling a bit lost. And he wants to find out what happened to his father. And it's a question of who can you trust? Who is telling you the truth? What really happened here? And we go on the ride while Harry tries to find out. So again, multiple POVs, multiple timelines. I love Peter Swanson's writing. I find that he continually surprises me in all the best ways. The audiobook was tremendous. I did like tab up only a couple of pages in here. I need to go back to my audiobook before it expires. I got it from the library because I did definitely like bookmark more things. I don't know if anybody does that, like bookmark great passages and you're listening to the library book and then it expires and you're like womp womp. So I need to make a point to do that. But I would highly recommend it. If you're a fan of Swanson, I think you will enjoy this book. Let me know. When I did post about reading it, I was so excited to see how many people agreed that this was such a great book. So I'm just massive, massive fan. I only have 2 Peter Swansons left to read, not counting Keimer's Saving. So I just bought The Girl with the Clock for a Heart, which was his first book. And let's do a sidebar. So again, if you guys follow me on Instagram, you would have seen me basically crying puddles of tears via a story post about Book Depository closing. And I got lots of responses from people, including my fabulous friend Krista from Books and Jams, who let me know that Blackwell's has UK covers, ships to the US. The shipping cost is in the price. It is totally reasonable compared to Book Depository. I did a lot of cross-referencing. And I felt it was very important for me to do a test order to make sure that it was good, because I have a whole lot of pre-orders coming, or had, from Book Depository that all got canceled over the summer. Pre-orders coming out in the summer obviously got canceled. So I did order A Girl with a Clock for a Heart and maybe a couple other things. So stay tuned for a book haul, but I'm excited for that. And then I still have 8 Perfect Murders to read. I made such a stink about wanting to read all the books that get spoiled in it. I have read some of them. I think I'm just gonna read the book. Like, I feel more excited to read 8 Perfect Murders than I feel to read the handful of books that are spoiled in it that I haven't read yet. So stay tuned, more to come. But long story short, loved this book. In the interest of staying dark and messed up, full disclosure, the next 2 books are dark and messed up, and then we're gonna end on a happy note. Pun intended, wait and see. But the next book I physically read, mostly, is All Good People Here by Ashley Flowers. I did wind up getting the audiobook, which I listened to for the duration of one walk because I didn't want to stop reading it. But I mostly physically read this book. So Ashley Flowers is the woman behind the true crime podcast Crime Junkies. I bought this book last year. This was on my 23 and 23 because I bought this last year, was so excited to read it, and then I just didn't. And I had heard so many great things about this. I knew it was going to be dark and messed up. And I, again, really enjoyed this book, but it's definitely super dark. And I'm really glad I read it. I had a lot of fun tapping this one up. Lots of things in this worked for me. So this is a dual timeline book again. And it says, you can't ever know for sure what happens behind closed doors. So this book takes place in Wakarusa, Indiana. And it says, everybody remembers the infamous case of January Jacobs. So she was 6 years old. Her parents woke up one morning and she was missing from her bed. And then, like, the next day, her body is found in a ditch. She is dead. And the case, while having some suspects, wasn't solved. And then in the present day, we are meeting Margot Davies. So she is a journalist. She is returning to Indiana to take care of her uncle, who has early onset dementia. And no sooner is she back in town that there is a news report that a 5-year-old girl from a few towns over has gone missing. And Margot used to live across the street from January. She has been low-key obsessed with this case since she was a child. She has been living with the fear of the fact that she was neighbors with January, and in her head, there has been this dark stranger who basically stood between their houses and sort of went eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and wound up taking January. And in her head, it could have been her. So this case has haunted her all of her life. And as a journalist, she is looking to investigate it. So we get a lot of obsession from Margot, which I love. We do get the past and present timeline. So we get the timeline from when January went missing. We have this very small town. Again, this case has been sort of the center of this town for all of these years. Everybody has an opinion, and we get to see things unfold in both timelines. So the January Jacobs case, for those of you who are true crime buffs, like I am, not as Buffy the Vampire Slayer, not as much of a buff as Ashley Flowers is, but this has some definite hearkenings of the JonBenet Ramsey case. So the fact that I knew a lot about the JonBenet case definitely planted some seeds in my head, definitely had me thinking some certain things, but you can see some of the similarities, and I know there are a lot of theories around that case, so I appreciate how Ashley Flowers used that case in this book, I would say. And again, I really enjoyed it. It is not one that is shying away from dark and messed upness, which I feel like should sort of be obvious with missing children and true crime and journalists investigating it. So we do get to see some of the police point of view. And again, I feel like Margot's journey is really obviously at the center of this book and really interesting to watch. And kind of similarly, but very differently to Gil in this book, we see someone who is so obsessed with looking for something, with trying to get an answer to something, with trying to prove something, with trying to get to the bottom of something, that we really see how that obsession takes over and how it impacts them. But there's a lot of really great characters in this book. There is one in particular that I very much enjoyed, but I'm not going to tell you who it is because I don't want to tell you anybody who comes into this book. And I just thought it was really well done. It's also one of the most beautiful covers. And it definitely, like I said, like very much in a Peter Swanson way, it really surprised me in a lot of ways, but I really loved it. So like I said, I did listen to just a smidge of the audiobook. I really wanted to physically read that book, but I also want to shout out our audiobook narrators, which will all be included in the description box down below. So it is Brittany, Pressley, Karissa, Vacker, and Ashley Flowers, it says. So I'll be honest, I'm not sure who Ashley Flowers was the narrator or like what voice she narrated. There is some media narration in this, like reporters and stuff like that, but I only listened to a smidge of the audio. Really enjoyed it though. So whether you're physically reading it or going to listen to it, highly recommend it, but just know it's dark. Because that's basically what I love. All right. So the next dark book I have for you guys is You Shouldn't Have Come Here by Geneva Rose. So I had the physical arc of this, and then I also got a Libro FM ALC advanced listener copy. Oh my goodness. And I binged this. So again, if you watched my weekend vlog, I listened to this in 2 days. It was a very compulsive read. I don't know if it was like 9 hours, but I did a bunch of walks during that vlog. I was listening to it while I was cleaning and doing other things. Like I wanted to know what was going to happen next. So this book has 2 POVs. Our audiobook narrators were Andie, Arndt, and Andrew Eiden. So very much enjoyed the audiobook narration of that. And this is my second Geneva Rose book. So I read One of Us is Lying. No, I read One of Us is Dead, which came out last year, which I totally enjoyed. And then I have The Perfect Marriage. No, A Perfect Marriage. Okay, let me try this again because I just fumbled the titles of both of her books. So this is my second Geneva Rose book that I have read. So I read One of Us is Dead last year, which I very much enjoyed, which is kind of like a Desperate Housewives, rich people behaving badly set in Buckhead, Atlanta. And then I have The Perfect Marriage, which I was going to read, and then I got this. So I decided to read this one first. So I very much enjoy her writing. So I come at this from having read only one book. And I would say this was definitely different than One of Us is Dead. And as much as I love an author who continually delivers what you expect from them, Peter Swanson, Riley Sager, Jennifer Hillier, the stories are all different, but I feel like I always know I'm in one of their books. This book from Geneva Rose to me felt very different, but not in a bad way. It felt like you're always going to get something different from her, but it is still dark and messy. So you're always going to get kind of the same thing from her, if that makes any kind of sense. But I very much enjoyed it. So this is an isolated thriller. This is the cautionary tale about going to a B&B alone. So Taylor Adams has gotten me off of rest stops. I'm trying to think, what was the other book I was talking about? This one's gotten me off of a solo trip to a B&B. And then, darn, what was the other one that I was like, cautionary tale? Oh, a writing retreat, The Writer's Retreat by Andrea Bartz. I was like, I don't think I want to go to a writing retreat alone. I'm just afraid to do anything. I'm just never going to leave my house. It pays to be a homebody. I'm going to go for walks. I'm just going to stay home. So, and you shouldn't have come here. We have a woman named Grace Evans, and she is an overworked New Yorker. She is just looking for a break. She wants to get out of town. Every year she picks a vacation by basically blindly throwing a dart at a map, coming to an area, and then finding a place to stay there. So this time around, she gets an Airbnb at a ranch in the middle of Wyoming, super tiny town, super isolated, but she just wants to basically like get away from it all. So she is here to hunker down and just like leave the world behind. So the owner of this B&B is a guy named Calvin Wells, and it says he is a handsome man, but there are things that Grace discovers that she's not too pleased about. A lack of cell phone service, a missing woman, and a feeling that something isn't quite right with this town. And she is the only person staying at the B&B right now. It is a small ranch. He inherited it from his parents, and he winds up having like some parties there. It turns out to be his birthday, so she's meeting his family and friends. And kind of despite all the red flags and the warning signs, she can't help but kind of fall for him a bit. But as her departure date is getting closer, his behavior starts to get a little bit more peculiar. And there are definite questions of like, what's going on here? What's happening here? So this is a book where I talked about it in the vlog. So they're on a ranch in Wyoming. There's a lot of animal stuff in this. There definitely, the word carcass comes up a few times. This is not a book that is, like, I have read some books that we will go down like a deeply descriptive murder scene. I read, my Patricia Cornwell obsession. She does not shy away. We are at the autopsy table. We are seeing it. We are smelling it. We are like hearing sounds of things. This skeeved me in a different way. So I definitely had a couple gag reflex moments when it comes to some animal ranching stuff. It's just like not my wheelhouse. But I did really enjoy the book, and I really enjoyed her characters. And I like how she, again, this was so different from One of Us is Dead. And I feel like I was waiting for something or like expecting something, but this was such a different book. And I give her huge props for like going in a new direction and keeping me very much on my toes. So I would recommend it. I definitely had a good time with it. So you get those isolated vibes, not like we're on an island and nobody can come or go or anything like that. Like she can drive into town. Again, it's a whole town full of people, but she is just very separate from her life. And I was here for it. So highly recommend. She's definitely a bingeable writer. I'm a bingeable reader. She's a bingeable writer. And I'm very excited to read The Perfect Marriage because that is the book that I keep hearing tons of great things about. So I do have that one. And that's definitely going to be my next book of hers that I'm going to read. So I did talk about it, my most anticipated, but it was great. And then the last book I'm going to talk about today, which is my ending on a happy note, is Happy Place by Emily Henry. So I also was so grateful and so fortunate to get the audio ALC of this from Libro FM, which is read by my favorite person in the world, Julia Whelan, when it comes to audiobooks. It was so good. It was so good. She is just, you guys know, she is the queen of the audiobook. And I did pre-order this book as well, but I was not mad getting a bit of a sneak peek to it. So I'm very excited for the book to come because I did bookmark the heck out of the audiobook and I really enjoyed this. So this is my third Emily Henry books. I read Beach Read, I read Book Lovers, and this. I have not yet read People You Meet on Vacation, but I have it. So I kind of basically want to dive right into that right now because I feel like I need some more Emily Henry in my life. She just captures, I feel, friendships and relationships and banter and humor and heart, and really can kind of strip away the curtain and strip away the facade and so beautifully show people as they are, who they are, kind of like warts and all, insecurities, everything. And I feel like she just does it with such a beautiful hand, the way she describes these characters, the way she writes her books. And I always, of the 3 books I've read now, find a bit of myself in her characters, find some relatability somewhere, find some nostalgia somewhere. So this book is about a group of 6 friends who have known each other since college, or 5 of them have, and then one of them is a partner for one of the friends in the group. But they've all been together for a long time. And every summer they take a week-long vacation at a house in Maine, which is the family house of Sabrina, who is one of the girls in the group. And this year, when they get there, they find out that this is going to be the last summer that they're going to vacation at this house because Sabrina's father is selling the house. So this vacation comes with a lot of weight, a lot of nostalgia, a lot of sentimentality, and Sabrina is bent on making this be like their best vacation ever and wants to do all the things they always do and just have it be amazing. But the hitch is that 2 of the people in the group, Harry and Wyn, so Harriet and Wyn, have been dating for like 10 years. They've been engaged for a long time. And what nobody else in the group knows is that they broke up a couple of months ago. But in order to sort of keep the peace, to give Sabrina this perfect week that she wants, they have decided to basically fake date for the week and pretend that they're still together because they don't want to do anything that's going to ruin the trip for anybody else. But as you can guess, there is a lot of unresolved pain and friction between the 2 of them. And it's not as easy to pretend you're still with the person that you have broken up with a couple months ago, especially when your hearts are still in pieces. So Harriet is doing her surgical residency out in San Francisco. As we're meeting these characters, as I said, we get multiple timelines, and in the present, they are kind of all, they've moved to different places. These are people who were roommates together. They had a house together. They all went to grad school in New York. They wound up living together. So they've been very tight for a really long time. And as what happens as you grow older, you start to physically grow apart. People start to move to different places and pursue different passions. And it often leads to you growing apart emotionally as your life changes. So I feel like she does a great job of showing us how they became friends, how they're so tight when they were younger, that perfect college experience of found friends, found family, that instant just connection with people that you have, and how they stayed together, how they tried to stay together because they didn't want to not live with each other, not be apart. Like they all went to grad school in New York City, they went to college in Vermont, but then how you grow and change, and how that shift and that dynamic change impacts people. And you have the friend who's trying to hold on to the glory days, and you have the people who are trying to break free, not of your friendships, but to change their lives. And then at the core of this, we know that Harry and Wyn have broken up and nobody else knows. So we're watching them try and navigate this territory. And you can still see that I think a lot of people have been in relationships where relationships end, but it doesn't mean you don't still have love for that person. And it certainly doesn't mean that you're all well and better the next day. So it becomes kind of like this ex-lovers, fake dating, second chance romance, I would say. And I just thought it was so much fun. I loved the dynamic of these characters together. I loved watching them try and have this like best week ever. And I've talked about it on here before. I went to school in Boston. A lot of my friends stayed there afterwards. And then we used to get a house on the Cape. Not the same house. We would just like rent different places. Get a house on the Cape in the summer for a week. And it gave me kind of all of those vibes. And I can certainly relate to relationships changing, you know, as you grow older, as people start to move away and as dynamics kind of change, and that desire to hold on to it, but also that that need to have to shift and grow as you shift and grow, if that makes any kind of sense. But I loved it. I definitely shed some tears. Julia Whelan is outstanding. There were so many relatable parts to this that I just loved. I was laughing out loud. I mean, it's like everything and anything I want from an Emily Henry book. I really feel like this woman can do no wrong. I also really feel like there's some sirens going in the background. Not as far in the background as I think they are. Let's just let the fire truck go by. I can't wait to grow and shift and move someday. Like in Siren Central. So anyway, I think if you're a fan of Emily Henry, you will very much enjoy this. So I have heard a few people say, oh, it's another vacation book. People We Meet on Vacation was a vacation book. I haven't read that one yet, so I have no opinion on that. I don't know if there's similarities between the two. I don't know if there's like similar vibes to it or situations or anything like that. But after I read it, I will happily comment back. But coming in blind, not having read that book, I think it's great. So very much enjoyed it. Like I said, Julia Whelan is outstanding. I cannot wait for my pre-order to arrive. I can't wait to tab it up with all of the things and then definitely reread it at some stage of the game. But it's really, really good, you guys. I really loved it. And it's like one of those books where I read the premise and I was kind of like, okay. And as I was reading it, I just loved it more and more. And again, like I saw some of myself in Harry. I saw some of myself in Sabrina. I saw some of myself in Wynne. I think Emily Henry, like I said, she really delicately handles some difficult subjects. I feel like she does a really good job of humanizing everybody. And I feel like it's just so seamlessly woven into her style and her story that her characters feel like people you know, or feel like people you knew, or feel like your own friends, or again, yourself. So I just really, really loved it. And I'm excited for People We Meet on Vacation. It's the only one I have left, which always bums me out, which is why I've held on to it. But anyway, Happy Place was wonderful. I loved the structure of the book, how she did the different timelines, how we got the backstory on the friend group and the present. And huge fan, if you can't tell, huge fan. So that's going to do it for part 1. Definitely tune back in for part 2. I'm going to talk about some more Peter Swanson. I am currently listening to The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave. I'm like 45% in, I think. I'm totally enjoying that as well. Full disclosure, part of my motivation is because the Apple TV show with Jennifer Garner just came out, which I very much want to watch. It's also going to fit a bingo square, so I also really want to read the book. But I'm definitely enjoying it. I have read one other Laura Dave book, which I very much enjoyed, and then I'm reading The Kind Worth Saving. So all good things happening. All good things happening. I don't know what I was just going to say, so we're just going to go with all good things happening. But I hope you guys are having some great reading whenever you are watching this. Thanks for watching me, for being here, hanging out. If you're new here, thanks for watching. If you made it this far, would love to have you back. Subscribe, do all that fun stuff too, would be amazing. And yeah, there's more videos coming, more book recommendations for bingo, and I will see you in those other videos. So I hope everyone's doing great. Take care, everybody. Bye.